What's up, everyone? Appreciate y'all all tuning in for this very special, spooky, scary topic that we have today. This is something that I didn't really think of as like traditionally nerdy or anything like that. And Kate reached out, and I'm so excited to talk about this. I feel like we all have memories from like when we were kids or even adults, going out with friends, going to haunted houses, hay rides, corn mazes, things like that. I mean, I can even recall like being a kid, running to my mom, being so scared and stuff like that. So super excited about it. So welcome to episode 8 of All Things Nerdy. I am Nate. That is Joe. God, that's so confusing. That is Joe. Um, and that's where we're at.
Awesome. Well, of course, Joe, big time nerd as well. But Kate, without further ado, talk nerdy to us.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Kate, and I'm a haunter. So a haunter is an industry term that people will typically use to describe somebody who either works for a haunted house or also just somebody who's really, really into that. And that's something that I've been doing for almost 16 years. And I've done a lot of different stuff within the industry. I've worked for a couple of professional haunted attractions. One of them, it was my husband's. And that was themed as a 1950s radiation laboratory, which was super cool. It won some awards, its first and only year, RIP. And then we worked together at a haunted hayride and a haunted trail for a number of years, did some actor training and leadership stuff there. And then after that, we had a Victorian house for a number of years, which, just begs for all of the spooky stuff. And so we ran what is called a home haunt, which is, an amateur, no admission fee, just something that people do for fun, usually in their garage or their yard. But because we're real extra, we actually ran it through our house just on Halloween for the neighborhood. We would get about 200 people to come through, and we put in a secret passageway behind a bookcase to our basement and all sorts of stuff. And at that point, about a quarter of the people would turn tail and run. I mean, there was a red light at the bottom of the steps. They'd say, "Oh, I've made a terrible choice. I am getting out of there." So no longer live in that house. So at the moment, I'm just an enthusiast. A topic I'm passionate about, and do a lot of traveling, going to different interesting haunted attractions around the country, and to see what's the latest and greatest and who's doing something cool.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, first thing I'd like to say is you pointed out something like you're an enthusiast, you're passionate about that. This is what our podcast is all about, right? It's not specific topics or anything. It's all about your passion. So we appreciate that you wanted to come on here and talk about all this. And I guess my very first question for you that I have, because you said you've been doing this, what is like the best event other than your husband's own specific that won awards and RIP, right? What is the best event you've ever been part of?
Now, been a part of as in like worked in it myself, or that I have gone to as a patron?
Either, both.
Okay. I've not been involved professionally with that many, so I will go with the latter, just as a patron, a victim, I suppose. And for the longest time, it was actually the 13th Gate in Baton Rouge. My husband and I got married in September, and we went to New Orleans for our honeymoon, and drove up to Baton Rouge one day to go to the 13th Gate. And they thought it was cool. We were there on our honeymoon. They gave us free t-shirts. And they're just doing some really amazing stuff there with movie quality sets. Very, very immersive. And I'll mention something that's super cool to me called suspension of disbelief. This is a little bit of a side topic. We can get back to it later. But you want a haunted house that makes you for a moment believe that you are where they want you to think that you are. You're not in a warehouse or a barn. And that's something that the 13th Gate does really well. One of their super amazing scenes, they built an entire submarine in there. It's incredible. And I forget if it was aliens or sea creatures or something, but you go through this huge sub, and then you come out the other end and you are in Atlantis, sunken Atlantis, and they have sand on the floor. And that is the detail that really sold me, because they are addressing 360 degrees to make this scenario as believable to you as possible. And it was so cool.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, that's one that I've loved for a really long time. And then just this past year, the 13th Gate has been dethroned.
No,
Yeah.
I was so proud.
No.
I'm like, I was about to say, like, I live in New Orleans. I can't wait to go.
No, you should still go. It's incredible. I would send anybody who's interested in this stuff there, just because it's like you were in another world. But the other ones I want to mention is the Chippewa Lake Slaughterhouse, which is up near Cleveland. And I was skeptical about it because the slaughterhouse theme, yawn. Oh, it's a slaughterhouse. Surprise. They're also killing people and maybe eating them. And everyone's haunted house is doing that. But it was amazing. And it's in an old industrial building. It may have been an actual slaughterhouse at some time. But the thing that's great about this is that they've got it in a specific era. This is put in the 50s or 60s. And it is incredibly believable. It's full of equipment from this facility itself. And a lot of times haunted houses have really loud music, hard rock music or whatever, in your face all the time. It's quiet at this place, which makes it really creepy. And
That's what I was
they've
about
got,
to say. I feel
Yeah.
like I prefer that because it's just what I would be used. Like if I walk in somewhere, I expect like, those kind of things, right? And then very, very like if I walked there just dead silent and you could like hear your own heart, you kind of, you get that feeling. Ooh, I'd be terrified.
Well, we got a comment. Let's see. It says, this isn't where I thought it was going, but this is awesome. Kind of want to do the Jack the Ripper tour over in UK. Oh, that brings up a question. Have you done anything overseas?
No, I actually didn't have a passport until December. So that's something that I would love to do. There's haunted houses are spreading in popularity around the globe, and that's super cool to see because they're taking this in a lot of different directions. Because what we think of as scary in America is not necessarily scary overseas. There's a great one in Hong Kong at Ocean Park. It's a theme park. And they tried to basically copy and paste at first American haunted houses overseas, and no one cared. They were boring and they failed because they used American cultural references, putting in Dracula, Frankenstein, etc., which is boring anyway.
Right.
But there were things that had no meaning. So people didn't care about it. So this went away for a while, but now they've gotten the right idea where, we're going to use, local beliefs, references to ghost stories, and stuff is really taking off. And I love to see how people are doing things differently, and what's scary there and why that works. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of ones that I'd love to go to.
I feel like sticking to the cultural things would make it so much more of a deeper meaning. Like even me, like if I go to American ones and it's just like you said, a slaughterhouse, you expect it. Now some are higher quality. The one you're talking about is great, but even me, like if there's some way to make it more personal or something that would maybe, and you can't make it directed towards me, but like something like not Frankenstein. Like I just feel like that's an easier way to get a response out of me than if I walk in and it's like a guy with a chainsaw cutting on like a pig. I'm like, yeah, I've seen that, watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, that's like every haunted house. That's like a typical, like, oh, he's got a chainsaw and he turns it on behind you.
Also, it's copyright infringement. So any haunted house that's using Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, they could get sued potentially and shut down, which actually happened to Fear Fair in Seymour, Indiana, that had a actually really cool movie themed haunted house, which I'm usually not a fan of, but they did it really, really well. And eventually they got a cease and desist from one of the movie companies, and they've had completely rethemed since then. And it's still an awesome attraction. But yeah, you're not supposed to do that. Obviously everybody does, but it could come back and bite you in the end.
Yeah. I had no idea because when I think
Yeah.
of Halloween, like you see that stuff all over the place. But I guess those people are paying for like the trademarks and stuff like that. So that makes sense. You did say something, suspension of disbelief, right? And you
Yeah.
when we were talking a little earlier, you brought up a fun fact that I've never really thought of when I've thought of like haunted houses and things like that. But then to hear you say what you said earlier, which I'm about to ask you to say, but then hear you say the suspension of disbelief, it even just like connected the two more. So do you want to share what you told me earlier about, who these people are and what they're doing?
Yeah. Can you refresh what we talked about?
Theater.
I honestly don't remember. Oh yeah, yeah. So what I like about haunted houses, I'm not going there to get scared. They don't really scare me. They can startle me, but that's about it. I'm not afraid of the people. But it's community theater. Really in a different aspect, and not only community theater, it's interactive community theater. So what I want to see in a haunted house is somebody doing something cool. It's acting, it's makeup, it's set design, it's special effects. And if actors are good, you can talk to them and banter with them back and forth. And if they're good, they'll be able to keep up and run their mouths at you. And that's a whole lot of fun. And especially if you're somebody who's still a little bit scared going into something like this, knowing that these are people you can engage with and ask them questions and talk back and forth to them, that kind of takes down that fear level a little bit.
Yeah. And I think the suspension of disbelief is such a big thing because you have to walk in, you have to be open-minded. So that's the biggest thing, like going into even just normal theater. If you go in, you're like, I know this is theater. I see the set, I see all this. Like you have a hard time being immersed in that life and what their world is supposed to be. But I feel like when you walk into a haunted place, that is so important to lose yourself, be open enough to like feel like you're there. It's gonna make the scares so much better.
Absolutely.
Can you share like any of the behind the scenes insights, like into creation, maybe like your husband's or your home,
Mm-hmm.
like in the operation of a haunted attraction, just to kind of give some insights on that theater and the setup and things like that?
Yeah. So first of all, being a haunt actor is really hard. It's a very, very physical job. And especially if you've got people who are doing pretty physical roles. You've got people that are known as sliders, and they've got knee pads and steel-toed boots, and their job is to run across the floor and slide on their knees toward a group of people. Makes a great noise. Sometimes they've got glove tips that spark. And it scares the heck out of people. There's something coming in from down here, which is not a direction that you're typically getting scared from, but that's hard. My husband has knee problems now because he did that one season. And especially if you're working in a haunted hayride, it's even worse because most people are going to be hopping on and off of the hay wagon in the dark on uneven ground all night, in the cold, in the rain sometimes. So that's really challenging. And let's see, what other interesting tidbits do I have in terms of behind the scenes? I mean, people are working on their haunted houses all year. Most people don't tend to think about them until September or October, but they're making plans in January and they're starting builds in March or April. And ideally, you want to change 30% of your haunt every year to keep it fresh. Most places are not going to do that because it's difficult and expensive. But you do want to change stuff out. And so there's a lot of stuff that has to be done to go into that in terms of planning and designing and getting materials and building and decorating before you even get to staffing and advertising. And it's a business. And that's something that people typically don't think about, but haunted houses are businesses. And most of the time they've got to get a year's worth of profit in 5 or 6 weeks, which is quite a challenge.
And usually only at night too, right? They only operate for X amount of hours throughout the day. Because if you go like to an outside one during the day, your experience is going to be drastically different. Yeah. So that is, from a business aspect, crazy to think about. You got to do a year's worth, right? You got to make this profitable, but you have such a small window to do it.
Very, very small. So people are getting creative about that. A lot of them are trying to open up for special events. They will re-theme and do, a scary little Christmas. Or, hey, bring your date for Valentine's Day and do some special event things like that. But also people a lot of times are opening haunted houses in property they already have. Paintball places are pretty popular. They have a lot of space, and you tend to attract the same type of people. But there's also, anybody who has a business. I've seen some weird pairings. My favorite one was pool supply store and haunted house.
That's
So the
interesting.
haunted house might just be an add-on to a business that they already have, which helps in terms of making money.
I mean, if it's
The
good, it's good.
Yeah.
The haunted house, I actually have a haunted house that's literally probably 5 minutes from me. It's in the same city. It's called Aatrox Factory. And of course, I pulled up their website to look at it before this, and they're actually doing like in November a lights out kind of theme with
Like the
like glow
super
sticks.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then in December they're doing what you just mentioned, like scary Christmas theme ones. I was like, all right, so hitting on some of that stuff too.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, we have a question come in from Paul. It says, what are your thoughts on other haunted venues other than houses? I grew up in a small town in Ohio where haunted cornfields are an absolute staple. Thoughts on other venues?
That's a great question. So a lot of times I'll use the term haunted attractions, which is kind of an umbrella term for all of them, your haunted trails, your haunted hay rides, all of this stuff. And I think there's a place for all of them because they all have different things to offer. So haunted cornfields are great if they're done well. The problem with them is that they're so big and they're so spread out that you can have not enough actors, which making you feel like you're by yourself in the middle of the field at night can be effective. But if that goes on for too long, it just gets boring. But I've been to some cool ones where they've got, different scenes set up in little shacks in the middle of the cornfield. And I saw one where a guy would do a somersault out of the corn into the path, which was great. And of course, haunted hay rides are a blast. It's a completely different experience than anything that you're going to walk through with different pros and cons. But there's so many different ones. I went to a haunted car wash last year,
That's so cool.
which was really funny. It's just a regular car wash, and they put on, a little haunted house in the car wash for one weekend in October. It was fun.
I really hope they like strapped a person to the like twirly thing, and their whole job was to just twirl and scream, right? Like, just that'd be amazing. So would you go? So you've worked at a couple of these places. When you were going to work with them, there is a theme overall, right? But do you get to pick your own costume? Do you do your own makeup, or do they provide somebody? What does that look like?
That's a great question too. And that depends on where you are. And it depends on whether or not there's a theme. Because some places are themed and some places are what I would refer to as haunt soup. Each scene is a little bit different and there's no overarching theme, which the one I worked at was a haunt soup, which is fine. And we got to mostly pick what scene we wanted to be at. And then most of the time, you're able to kind of take it the direction you want. There are some that are a lot more rigid in terms of, okay, we have a very high throughput. And so you don't have a lot of leeway in terms of what you do. You have to pop out of this door and then go back because we can't hold people up. But most of the time, you've got at least some say in how you create your character. I spent a season in an Old West town. There was a whole lot of fun. And my husband was a snake oil salesman. And he was a distraction, basically. And he would, come out sounding like Foghorn Leghorn, trying to sell people, an ointment for their hemorrhoids. And meanwhile, I'm, just out of view. And I was like a crotchety old housewife with an apron and a bonnet and a chicken. And while they're looking at him, I cut up behind him with a pot and a spoon. Scare the heck out of them. And so, that's something that you don't think of as a traditionally scary character. But that's something that was a whole lot of fun. And we got to do that scene basically however we wanted to.
That's really cool.
I think the makeup. So I have a little half sister, and she like dove into like she does a lot. She's younger, so not professionally, but for fun. She does a lot of like this horror, gory kind of makeup, and it's so cool. And you sent me some pictures that I didn't just throw out there because if you're scrolling LinkedIn, and the next thing you know, you see some blood. And I didn't post those, but I will put them in the comments when I post this. But I think that makeup and all that goes into it has to be talked about. There has to be appreciation there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically did our own makeup, but places will usually have a crew of makeup artists. And you go down the line, okay, you are in this scene. This is what your stuff is supposed to be. And a lot of places will have an airbrush system set up. And so you can, just kind of paint people like that. Or you might have to glue on prosthetics, or for speed, a mask is always a good idea. All you need is black around the eyes, pull it on, there you go. But something you got to think about is don't have any exposed skin. So if you are some sort of a zombie, you can't have normal person hands. So you got to either wear gloves or rub some dirt on your hands, or address everything, or that ruins, like we talked about, some of the suspension of disbelief. Everyone remembers, oh, you're just some guy. Why am I scared of you?
Yeah. Okay.
Is there an award, or like, so think like Comic-Con, right? Is there like a gathering of people that do this every year? Like,
A
where is
gathering of ghouls, perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah,
If there's not, you should make that.
yeah,
Yeah.
there is. There's multiple. There tend to be regional haunted house conventions. So one of the biggest ones is the Midwest Haunters Convention. It was in Columbus, Ohio for a number of years. It's been in Chicago for a couple of years now, where I think it's going to stay. And there's also, oh gosh, there's another one, HauntCon, that's in New Orleans permanently.
Oh,
It used to go to a different city every year, which was very interesting, but now it has a permanent home there in New Orleans. And you get all of your haunters there. It's typically in June or somewhere out of season where people aren't busy. And you get people from all over, and there's educational classes on, things like makeup, or training your actors, or hey, I want to build this cool set piece, how can we do that? And a lot of business classes too on, okay, how do I do my taxes for this, and how do I set myself up as a small business. And there's a trade show where you can buy a lot of stuff. You've got super cool vendors. You can buy giant 30-foot animatronic props, and weapons and costumes, and anything you can imagine. And a lot of times there's tours, with, okay, let's take a bus to all of these nearby haunted houses, because people who are in this business aren't able to go to many because they're working in October, when most of them are running. And then most of them feature a costume masquerade ball, which is incredible because these people go all out, and it's just a blast to see.
that's amazing. You're just like making me like I'm making a list of all the things in New Orleans that are like I need to go see now. Like
Mm-hmm.
So Joe's favorite city is New Orleans. He loves coming to New Orleans. I think his little kid, like, her favorite city is New Orleans. So there you go, Joe. Bring the whole family.
Yeah. I do have a question. It's more of like on like safety. So
Mm-hmm.
how do haunted attractions balance like the need to like of course scare visitors and then also like ensure their safety and well-being?
Yeah. I think most people would tell you that the scariest thing in a haunted house is the fire marshal, because you have to pass inspection there, or they're not going to let you run. Um, And so you have to get inspected by typically the county. Sometimes it's the city, but it's usually the county. They have to come in and inspect. And there's, depending on where you are, a lot of different rules that you have to follow. If you are over a certain square footage, you have to have automatic sprinklers. You have to have clearly marked emergency exits, and various plans in place, and people trained on what those plans are, in case something goes on. And most places are going to have big security forces as well, because people can get rowdy. And keeping an eye on anything that might go wrong, somebody starting a fight in a line, somebody punching an actor, which happens more than you'd like. And so there's a lot of local jurisdiction stuff that boxes have to be checked before they'll let you open.
Makes sense. As far as punching an actor, I can see
So
that you spook somebody and they just, I'm so sorry.
It happened to me. I've gotten hit.
oh wow. So do the fire marshals like go through it as a guest to test it out?
No, they'll go in during the day when all the lights are on, so that they can see, all the nuts and bolts going on behind the scenes, and make sure that everything is as it should be.
That makes sense.
So something we always ask on every one of these episodes, because these are such interesting things that not everybody thinks about. If I am a new person who's like just really enthusiastic about haunts, right? How do I go about getting into this?
Yeah. So if you want to get involved in terms of doing it yourself, there's a lot of communities, especially online, in terms of what you can get involved in. If you want to be a home haunter, you want to do, a super elaborate yard display or run something through your garage. Most places have a semi-local home haunt community. Cincinnati has one called the Garage of Evil. And they will get together and make things or post tutorials, and talk about what they're working on and what they want to work on. There's also on Facebook a Women Who Haunt group, because there are fewer women than men, and women tend to have a different experience in the industry than men do. And if this is something that you just want to go see a whole bunch, and don't know where to start, there are haunt review organizations. Obviously, everyone's tastes are personal, and just because somebody else likes it doesn't mean that you will. But there are haunt reviews that people will post. One of the big organizations is called the Scare Factor, and they have different teams across most of the country who will go to different ones and post pretty detailed reviews of what they liked, what they didn't. And they even go into things like, is there a snack bar? How easy is it to use the bathroom? Is your parking lot well lit? As a consumer experience, as well as the attraction itself. And you can, take a lot of information from there and use that as a starting point for where you want to go. But as I said, it doesn't mean that you're going to like it yourself, because it might just not be your style.
Right. So what is, I guess, your bucket list haunt? Do you have a bucket list haunt? What is the next big one?
Yeah, it's in Hawaii. It's at an old sugar plantation.
That's just a good vacation in general.
Yeah.
Hawaii and a haunted house.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but they're using a lot of Hawaiian folklore and local ghost stories. And, the old sugar plantation is super creepy and totally different from anywhere I've ever been. And it would be super cool.
That is awesome. I had something. It just left me. I'm so sorry. So I think it's kind of cool that you have local groups. Like, it makes me want to go to Facebook and pull up like New Orleans, but I'm sure the amount of like groups here for that kind of thing, because we're like a big voodoo city and like ghosts are a big thing here. It's kind of odd, like living here. I don't think I've been to a haunted house here, or I haven't even heard of the one in Baton Rouge until you mentioned it. And it makes me sad, because now I'm like, this is something I could have been doing.
Mm-hmm. There's one in New Orleans itself called the Mortuary. That's pretty good. You can take the trolley there.
Adding another to my list here.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
So the next one is Hawaii. Do you have one kind of pin that you want to participate in?
Not really. I'm old and tired. So, on the one hand, it's really fun to have an outlet for stuff like that. I'd probably go more the home haunting route again. It's only one night, and then you could be done. But to do, a 6-week acting commitment to, 2 nights a week, I've got a kid. I don't know. That ship might have sailed, but I would like to be involved, somehow.
At what age will you start taking your kids to these things?
Oh, she's already going. So she's turning 7 tomorrow.
Happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday.
I'll let her know. Thank you. And this is not something that we've ever pushed on her. And we took her to a haunted hayride 2 years ago, when she decided she wanted to go. It's one we'd been to before, so we knew it wasn't the absolute scariest. And going back to getting into stuff, hayrides are a great way to start. You are in a bigger group with people in a hay wagon, so that makes it a little bit less scary. You are also elevated up off the ground, which makes things less scary. So I thought that was a lot more approachable, and that's something that she's really enjoyed. She is not ready for anything beyond that. But also a lot of haunts will have a lights on tour one time a season, like a Sunday afternoon or something, and you can pay admission and go in and see all their stuff. which for ones that are really elaborately decorated is fantastic because I want to go in there and take my time and really look at all the work that they've put into their sets. So that's something that's good for younger kids as well, or other chickens. You can go through and see everything, and most of the time all their animatronics are working and everything, but there's no actors. So it can be really approachable.
It's really cool.
Did you have something, Joe? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so kind of on that topic. So the kids with the hay rides, like, how do you think haunted attractions can appeal to like a broader range of like visitors, including those who may be like hesitant or skeptical about like going to a haunted house?
Well, make sure you're doing something different. I would say you don't want to be the same thing that everyone else is doing. But on the other hand, everyone's afraid of clowns. Everyone's afraid of chainsaws. And so it's hard to create something really unique and cool without using some of those tired tropes because they are really effective. I mean, even from the parking lot at places, you can hear the chainsaw rev and hear screams immediately.
I was gonna say, I think the screams, like when they put them on the loudspeaker and stuff, those screams, I think that's one of the biggest things that like draw me in, pull me in, hearing those things. Because I immediately associated with like all the scary movies I've ever watched, people running for their lives, stuff like that. So just hearing it across the loudspeakers, that gets to me more. That like gets me hyped, you know. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, something in terms of, increased better customer experience too is altering your line experience, because some of these places at Saturday night in late October, you could wait in line for 3 hours if you don't buy a fast pass for $60. And so what can we do to change this? And a couple of cool things are happening. One of them is time ticketing, and you buy a ticket for a specific time, like you're going to see a show, which you are. So like you're going to the theater. Okay, you've got 2 tickets for $7.20 on Saturday. So you've got people staggering in, which cuts down on your line. Other places will give you a group number when you buy your tickets there, and then they call one group of, 50 people at a time. And in the meantime, you can go get concessions. Sometimes they're showing movies. They might have little shops. You can sit by the bonfire and other stuff to amuse yourself while you wait, other than just sitting in line.
Oh, that's really cool.
And I think so. I haven't been to one in a long time. So I used to live in Birmingham, and we had Sloss Furnace, we had Atrox.
I've been there, yeah.
I remember sitting there for hours, like, and you can hear the noise, the loudspeakers and stuff like that, but you're still just sitting there for hours. Yeah, waiting your turn, and then it's like a 10-minute experience, 15-minute experience, and then you're out. But I do want to add this. You talked about hay rides and how that's a great thing. I think one of the biggest things that are overlooked with hay rides is that you're locked on that hay ride. Your only option is to sit there scared or to jump off, at which point you're now on the ground with whatever else might be out there.
There is no emergency exit. There's no chicken door. You are stuck. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and you can't go anywhere. Like if I'm in a haunted house, somebody spooks me, I go, oh, I'm moving, I'm walking, I'm getting out of here.
You can only, cower so much.
Just cover your eyes. It's like, nope, if I can't see it, it's not here.
So I think if used properly, hay rides can be very scary.
Oh, they can. You've got to build them right. You have to build everything bigger since everybody is up elevated. So you need scares that are coming from up here to make people still feel like they're scared. And there's some, cool stuff happening with hay rides when they're done well.
Yeah. So you say you don't get scared a lot, like these things don't scare you. And I guess seeing behind the scenes and knowing about all that, I can see that. Walk us through, build a world, the scaredest you've ever been. What was the attraction and what happened?
All right. I got 2 stories for you here. And the first one is an embarrassing story about myself. So I was not always the fabulous ghoul that I am today. I have a background in art and theater, so I had all the raw materials to really get into this. But I was an outsider in the industry, and it was still scared like everyone else. So met my husband, who was then my boyfriend, and he has made me his personal Bride of Frankenstein. He has been into this, since he was in 2nd grade. It's just his thing. And so we went to a haunted house our first October together, and he had told me, look, don't run. If you run, they'll chase you. So, I knew that. And so I got all the way through. It was a terrible haunted house in retrospect called the Zombie Island. It's gone. It's been gone for many years. But we got through. And at the very end, when we're walking out, you think it's over. Here comes the guy with the chainsaw. It wasn't even real. It was an electric chainsaw. And my gut is still run. And so I run, and then I realize, oh, he said don't run, you can't run. But by that point, I am several yards ahead of him. But who's here? Oh, his best friend. So, okay, I'm not going to run. And he goes, you ran from me and clutched on to him?
If my wife did that, I'd be like, I guess I'm not your protector.
No, it wasn't like that. I was trying not to run, but I already did. But she still makes fun of me for that, which is valid. But in terms of, since then, there's one in Kansas City called The Beast, which is incredible. First of all, it's owned by a woman, and there's not a whole lot that are owned by women on their own. You have husband and wife teams, but in terms of solo women, there's not many. And so The Beast is super great for that reason. Also, it's huge. At the very end, there's either a 4-story slide or you can jump out the window onto an airbag.
I'm scared of heights. Both of those are scary. I don't want nothing to do with either one of those. Is there a walk out the door and down the stairs option, or
no? You have to go down. You have to go down the slide.
That's amazing.
But it's just really well done. They've got this forest that you can get lost in for ages that they've built inside, and it's very, very convincing. But this one part, it was, super dark. We had just come out of the forest, and there's a trigger for an animatronic. It's been pitch black. And then all of a sudden, a foot in front of me is this 20-foot tall headless horseman, rearing back. There's thunder and lightning and spotlights. I hit the deck. It was very effective. And then, of course, I laughed. I'm like, all right, that was really good.
That's awesome.
Have you ever scared anybody to the point like they pass out? Like you walk up, you spook, I'm like,
pass out? No, I've made people pee themselves multiple times.
Oh, that's worse. Oh no.
Yeah.
I feel like that'd be a goal, right? Like,
absolutely. You got to put a notch in your belt for all of the pees and poops you get.
Oh no.
Yeah, but it is delightful, and that is bragging rights within the haunt community of people who you can scare to that point. Obviously, you don't want to be mean about it, but they have paid you money to do this to them. And I also won't scare kids if I can avoid it, especially kids whose parents are dragging them through. But adults, game on. And there was a guy that I chased in circles around his group, and people who were like, "I just peed," and it's the best.
Sounds like a villain origin story.
Yes.
How many notches do you have in your belt? Do you know?
Probably 2 or 3, not that many. But I also didn't work as an actor for super many years, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. That's so good. Yeah. Well, are there any fun facts? We're coming up on time. Want to be cognizant and respectful of y'all's time. Are there any fun facts or just any like really cool stories that you want to share with the people listening?
Oh gosh, I have so many. I will limit myself to 2. So one of them is a history lesson, and one of them is a story. So a history lesson. First of all, I'm also a history nerd. Double nerd alert. I have a degree in history, so that's also my thing.
Nice.
Awesome.
And so haunted houses, where do they come from? We can thank Victorian prudery for the haunted houses we have today, which is very surprising. But think of the Victorian era. What are your options for entertainment? There's also very strict social morals in terms of what's appropriate, especially contact between men and women. And this was also the beginning of the amusement park era. And so you have this ride called the Old Mill. There is actually one of these at the Kennywood theme park in Pittsburgh still. It's one of the last of its kind. And it's a water ride, and it's through the dark, and now it's a mill or a mine. And at the very end, there's a big hill to end it on a scary note. And this became really popular because, you can clutch on to your man while you're in here, even if you guys aren't married. And
or his best friend, depends.
Yeah. So this became very popular. And kind of really started haunted houses. Then you get into, fairground dark rides, etc. But that's kind of the origins. So story number 2, The one of the coolest ones I've been to is actually a charity haunt. So you've got for-profit haunts that are there to make money, and then you have charity haunts that are there to support a charity. And in this one, it is at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, and all of the money from the haunted house goes to support this as a historic site. Which is fantastic. It's everything that I love. And they did some incredibly innovative stuff there. And it was one of the places where if you were up to be touched, you can get a glow necklace to show, okay, I'm up for whatever you guys are going to do. And they delivered. At one point, somebody dragged me into a cell and sat me in a chair and just like played with my hair for a while. And then eventually let me out. And you know that behind the scenes, they are waiting for people to take off the necklace and throw it. And at the end of the night, they've got bragging rights. I got 10. And then another time there was this big press and a crank on it. And the guy grabbed my hand and put it there, crank, crank, crank. And this thing is coming down closer and closer and closer and closer to my hand. And I'm like, I'm not going to flinch. Let's go. And eventually it gets down and touches my hand, and he brings it up, and there was a stamp on it that said, I survived.
That's so cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
It was a bragging rights for me. And the same attraction there, it was like you saw the same guy over and over. I know it was 10 or 12 different actors, but it was these white guys, bald head, middle build with this particular wound. And it was different people, but they were done up exactly the same. Like you were seeing the same ghost over and over and over and over. And it was super cool. Never seen anything like it.
I think that's what I would want. My biggest issue going to these things is, so I had a misunderstanding that we talked about before this podcast that they can't touch you. And I know some like can sign a waiver, but when you were talking to me about through this, I was like, oh, that's what I would want. Like, I think that is what would scare me. However, caveat, I'm not sure how I would react if someone like just grabbed me.
Dragging you? Well, I mean, you're a big dude.
I'm a big dude. If you're dragging me, bro, I'm terrified of you. I mean,
just throws you in a chair.
Yeah, I don't think you're really throwing me or dragging me, but that is still something that I think would be really cool, like the glow necklace, and to work through something like that just to see what could happen. I know there's like one in Tennessee. I see advertisements for it every year. It's like if you survive, like you get.
Is it McCamey Manor?
I don't know. I don't remember.
It probably is.
Okay.
I don't think it counts as a haunted house. It's simulated torture that you're paying for, but that's a different story.
Okay. Yeah, that's escalated.
Yeah.
That's a different avenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we're a little overtime here. Is there anything else you would like to share?
Oh gosh. Probably. I'll give you one more funny story. So my husband and I went to a haunted house in Lexington, Kentucky, and a reporter from the local paper latched on to the two of us. He was doing a story on this haunted house. It was their first year. And he said, oh, young couple. Yeah, I'm going to go with them, not knowing that we are the most boring people ever to go to a haunted house with because we don't scream or run. I might
appreciate the inner workings.
I applaud a lot. But so we're in the haunted house, and this guy, an actor, busts out of a door, and he's got a prop hammer in his hand, and it slips out of his hand and flies down the hallway and nails my husband right in the crotch.
Oh no!
It's me.
Welcome to the one where they can touch you.
Yeah, and this is not a touchy one. And so it takes me forever to realize what happened. I'm like, oh, why does my shin hurt? Something hit me. I'm not supposed to get hurt here. Meanwhile, he is on the floor in the fetal position, and this reporter is standing there like, what have I gotten myself into? And the actor was fantastic. He never broke character, but he came over, reached down, helped him up. He's like, are you okay? My husband's like, yes, I'm fine. He's like, God, it's just beginning for you. And which is exactly how you want to handle that.
That's awesome.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for jumping on here and talking to us about this. This is such a cool topic. I had so much fun. Joe, you did?
It's been great. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to message us or anything like that. Kate, if you ever just want to come on and talk again, we'd love to have you.
Oh, totally.
As always.
A lot of things I could talk about.
Well, thanks, y'all. We appreciate y'all.